think we're all ready.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the December 18th meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County. At this time, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. Bob Lucy is not in attendance today. Neil Majardin.
Here.
Ron Hartung.
Here.
Oscar Delgado. Don't see Oscar yet. Mayor Ed Lawson is joining us today.
Here.
Bill Thomas.
Here.
Adam Spear.
Here.
And Christina Swallow.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will move into the Pledge of Allegiance. Brian Stewart, I see you on the line. At least I see your picture. If you wouldn't mind leading us in the pledge, and I'll get out of the way, and I'll stand.
We'll use your flag if that's okay, Neilma.
Absolutely.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, at this time, we're moving into special presentation on our legislative discussion. Mr. Mike Hillary. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
No, we do not. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hillary, you're on.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks, Madam Chair. Happy to be with you again for the December meeting. Just we wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of the legislative session, some of those issues that we care about, and so sort of put on your radar that we will come back to you with some more information and seeking some guidance about at least one of those issues, if not more, that a fairly high profile. I want to talk a little bit about the session. This, as I think everyone understands, is going to be different than most. We will certainly not be in the building at the beginning of the session on February 1st. Don't know what exactly that's going to look like. It will be primarily, if not exclusively, remote. At that point, I know, from talking to legislators and their staff, they're working to figure out how they can be in the building safely. In some of the larger committees in the Assembly, for example, in order to keep social distancing, even the members can't be in the same room. They can't all fit at the same dais at the front of each of the rooms. So we're working in ahead of time trying to figure out how to do that. We're also doing a lot of briefings with legislators, with staff, with Bill and Amy and Michael and others. We're starting to do those, and we have some scheduled in the next couple of weeks with jointly with RTC Southern Nevada. So they kind of know our general priorities and view the RTCs as a resource. I think it's really important. We're working very well together, have a lot of the same concerns. And again, want those members, particularly if we're not going to be in the building, to remember that we're here as a resource and to ask questions, because when you talk about fuel taxes and the highway fund and the kinds of things we do, along with NDOT, it's complicated, and you don't want to make decisions without understanding that. So we're working really hard to do that in anticipation of a session that's not going to look like any others that any of us have been, other than the example from this summer, the two special sessions. And I think everyone, the legislators included, want to find a better way than that to do this. It did not work out very well this summer. It was not a good way to involve the public and those on whose behalf they're making those important decisions. The other is some of the big issues, obviously the budget, you all know that in your local government roles, and taxes, and what, if anything, the legislature will be able to do on that. A couple of other issues hanging over the session. There are two initiative petitions that appear as though they've qualified. They were pursued by the Clark County Education Association, the teachers union in Clark County. One would raise the gaming tax pretty significantly on the upper tier, and the other would be a fairly significant sales tax increase, specifically targeted at the local school support tax. Because those are initiative petitions, under the Constitution, the legislature must deal with those in the first 40 days of the session. They can deal with those by passing them and they become law. They can reject them and they go to the ballot at the next general election. They can pass a companion measure, or a competing measure rather, and put those on the ballot to compete with those two. It really has put the legislature and the governor in a pretty tough position. And I think they're certainly trying to, I would think now, look at what options they might put on the ballot besides those. Said the gaming is a fairly significant, would take the upper tier from 6 3/4 to 9 3/4. I believe it's a 3% increase in that rate. and it would increase the other would increase the local school support tax pretty significantly, about $0.015. But that would be a significant tax increase, particularly in Clark and Washoe counties where the rates are over 8% already. So that will, I think, suck a lot of the air out of the building at the beginning of that session. We've also heard some conversations, at least among legislators, that they may look to concentrate mostly on the budget at the beginning and really try to limit the number of large policy bills that ever come up during this session, and certainly at the beginning. And hopefully that as the spring wears on, it may be easier to get people in the building and have a more traditional looking process or some hybrid thereof. So that's just a flavor of what we're facing this session and the environment we will be in. Then we'll talk just a little bit about the transportation issues. Obviously, we've talked a little bit before about the climate initiative, the state's climate initiative. That final document came out about 2 weeks ago. So that will guide a lot of what happens during this legislature. We saw last session quite a bit of work on climate initiative and greenhouse gas. This is the next step in that. So we'll see a lot of policy bills and some impacts on the budget from the governor's decision to join the Clean Car Initiative. That was part of that with California and a number of other states to push electric vehicles adoption faster. So that will cycle through all of these things. And then within that, and again, I think it was the report that I gave last time, we talked about the interim committee during this current interim on the Senate Concurrent Resolution 3 to study electric vehicles and the impact on the highway fund. That interim work was supposed to come back with a recommendation for some kind of fee structure or understanding, moving a little further toward dealing with electric vehicles on the highway fund. The recommendation that came out was to go to this legislature and ask for an opportunity to study that further and bring recommendations back to the 2023 legislature. Probably the biggest one there, and there's a lot we don't know at this point, is the impact of potential constitutional amendment that's being recommended by the interim committee to change the restrictions on the use of fuel tax as it is put in the highway fund and limited to the traditional construction uses, and allow that to be used for transit infrastructure. We have not yet seen language. There are two potential bills to do that, one from the interim committee, one from the co-chair of that interim committee, Senator Chris Brooks. He was a prime mover behind the climate initiative and the greenhouse gas inventory, the changes and expansion of that this last session, and that's an issue that means a lot to him. He understands on the greenhouse gas initiative in particular that as we've dealt with the large scale issues at the utility level of encouraging renewable energy, the next one down is going to be a lot harder. And again, we talked about that at your previous meeting, so I won't spend much time unless you have questions, and that's transportation. So we have not seen language on what that constitutional amendment might look like. That would need to pass the legislature in 2021, pass it again word for word in 2023, and then go to the voters in 2024. And I'll certainly have room for Bill to jump in as well. Our recommendation to you at this point is to wait and see the language and get a little better sense of what's going on and what the proposal is. Depending on how that's written would certainly make a difference, I think, on how you all as our elected board made a decision and took to take a position on that. So until we know more, our recommendation would be to wait until we see that language and have a better understanding of the other pieces at play to know what that means. It could be relatively minor and allowing some discretionary use of that at your level. RTC Southern Nevada, the NDOT board, for example, could be more expansive than that. But until we see more, we're just not going to know where that sits. And I'll stop there for now. So you've heard enough from me, and be happy to answer some questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hillaby. Mr. Thomas, did you have some comments to start with?
The only thing I would add to what Mike said is that really it's a challenge for us right now to bring you specific recommendations on positions to take until we know exactly what the wording is. So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now until we get the actual bills and we can understand the significance of it. So our testimony or our position is based on knowledge and not speculation. So we had hoped originally when this was put on the agenda, we might have a little more information, but we're still waiting for the text to come out so we can understand the implications.
Thank you very much, Director Thomas. I guess my question, and this is maybe just for the public's edification, can you remind us, does the RTC get did they submit any bill draft requests? Do we get any, and what were they?
I'll let Mike talk specifically, but I think the answer is no and no. So go ahead, Mike.
Well, and I knew that. I just was to get it on the record that we don't get that. And to me, that just says that's why we need to continue to watch very closely and have Mr. Hillaby come back with regular updates and information for us. And I don't know how the other board members feel, but maybe at our next meeting, we could have a discussion about how the board participates in any potential initiatives or opportunities as the legislature convenes and moves along, things that we may find of particular interest and want to advocate on behalf of.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Mike Hillerby. And to Bill's point, as you well know and said, we do not have BDRs of our own, and we've had things in the past like microtransit. Last session, we worked with our local delegation. There will be a bill from RTC Southern Nevada to do the same thing. We talked about that at your last meeting. So we'll start to get some questions about how successful that's been here and the good launch we've had of our microtransit and be supportive of their efforts to do the same thing. I would always welcome you. I always caution clients that it's dangerous to ever go in that building anytime. You don't necessarily want to make yourself a target, but there are times when it would be very helpful to have you as the elected colleagues make your presence known as well, because you have your constituents to represent, and we'll certainly send up the red flare if we think if it's time to bring you there, and always happy to show you around, although it's likely to be virtually for a while.
Yeah, and I certainly don't suggest we as individuals do that. I think we speak as a body, and we have a designee as our voice in Carson City. I'm not advocating veering from that practice. It's more of having a discussion at an RTC meeting from our elected body individuals as to items of which transportation RTC related we might want to keep our ear to the ground on, or pursue opportunities to push some initiatives forward should those opportunities arise. I guess that's more to have a public discussion, Mr. Director Thomas, at our next meeting, which we can put on I'm sure the attorneys are getting nervous right now because I'm talking about future agenda items. So we'll put that at the appropriate agenda item. Do any other commissioners have any questions or comments from Mr. Hillerby? And if you just raise your hand, I don't know that I have the electronic blue hand authority. Maybe I do. If you just come on the screen and raise your hand, I will call on you.
Madam Vice Chair?
Yes.
I just want to note for the record that Oscar Delgado did join the meeting at 9:02.
He did. I see him. Welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, Madam Clerk. You indicated we don't have any public comment on this item, and I don't believe we need to take any action. So we will now move on to item 1, the approval of the agenda. May I get a motion?
So moved, Hartung.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 2, public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment?
Yes, Madam Vice Chair. We received 2 articles of public comment yesterday before the deadline of 4 p.m. One was from John Locke, who's a driver with Keolis, and the other was from Andrew Barbano, who writes an article called Barb Wire. You may be familiar with it. Both are pertaining to the enforcement of masks on our buses, and I will enter these for the record. They were emailed to you this morning.
Thank you very much. Item 3, consent items. Do any members have any items they wish to pull for discussion? Okay, seeing none, may I get a motion?
So moved, Hartung.
I have a motion. Second from Mayor Lawson. He threw up the peace. He threw up the peace sign, which I believe means a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Okay, we are at item 4, Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO 4.1. Who's giving the presentation? I see Ms. Cummings is up and smiling. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
No, we do not.
Thank you very much. Take it away, Amy.
Thank you, Amy Cummings with RTC. And I am going to be sharing an update with you today on the Regional Transportation Plan. We are nearing the home stretch. There's no action required today, but we do want to give you a first look at the preliminary evaluation of the alternatives for the roadway projects. We shared this information with our agency working group yesterday, so it has now been presented to the staffs at each of the jurisdictions. And we're hoping to get feedback over the next month as we finalize a draft project listing that we'll package up and put in the RTP. So in January, what we want to do is bring a draft project listing for approval that will then be the basis of the draft RTP at the following meeting. So again, this is an introductory item. I know it's the first time you'll have seen this information, and we are happy to meet with anyone one-on-one. We also have a public survey with some of this information that's out as well for the community. So as you're all aware, the RTP establishes the goals and the transportation investments through 2050. And we want to bring this in with an approval by the RTC in March. And that will give us time for FHWA and FTA to review and make sure we are have a fully approved plan by May. These are the guiding principles that the board approved earlier this year. And that's, of course, what everything in the RTP comes back to, that we want to support safe and healthy communities, economic prosperity and innovation, sustainability, and to increase the travel choices for our region. We had a lot of projects to look at. So for purposes of our public survey and communicating this information, we wanted to make it a little bit more readily understandable and easier to present in a graphic form. So we've divided the projects into the different types: freeways, construction of new roads, capacity projects on, and then multimodal projects that don't add new capacity for cars. And I know we had in the packet last month the evaluation criteria. There's some updates requested from last month that are in today's packet. And still the two most heavily weighted criteria are safety. And this shows you the composite sort of scoring of all of the roads in our region with regard to crash frequency, rate, and severity. And then the second most heavily weighted is related to traffic congestion. So here we again want to express our appreciation to Truckee Meadows Regional Planning. They provided us with the 2050 consensus forecast. And that's what we've been working on over the last month, was analyzing that in our regional travel demand model. So when you look out to 2050, if we have no transportation improvements, we have our existing network. The map on the left shows you the level of traffic congestion we're going to be looking at. And as you can, is indicated here, almost all of the regional roads in North Valleys and Spanish Springs are failing, exceeding our level of service standards. So that's a significant concern. If we build everything that's proposed in this package that you're going to look at today by 2050, we're still going to have some traffic congestion. We're not able to build our way out of all this of congestion, because we do, again, we want a lot of growth in our community, and we want our community to thrive, but we can reduce that traffic congestion significantly. And this is a peak period graphic that is in this map. So again, a quick summary of the evaluation criteria. We're looking at safety, congestion, project readiness, the regional land use, the regional plan land use categories, whether other agencies or private parties will be bringing funding to a project, equity, and public input in the agency input. So these last two have not been concluded yet. The survey just launched yesterday, so it won't be until next month that we have the final evaluation of all of these projects. And we want to make sure as well that we are incorporating input from our partners at each of the jurisdictions. So we're going to continue to work closely with them over the next weeks. So also for projects on existing roads, we're looking at how they scored in our bike ped master plan, as well as the pavement or bridge condition index. And for new roads, we are also looking at average daily traffic projections, flood mitigation, and emergency response, or fire evacuation. So this is a first look at, again, this is preliminary. We do expect this to change as we get that public input and the input from each of the jurisdictions. But I think it did show that we've been on the right track with our previous RTP, and that when you look at the needs for new capacity on existing roads, again, I don't think it's any surprise to anyone here, Sparks Boulevard, Pyramid Highway, and Lemon Drive round out the top 3 in terms of needs. And those are projects that currently are in development. Excuse me. Now, one of the other things that we're going to be using the RTP for, as we identify new projects, they may not be implemented in the near term, but this will help identify some of those early planning studies and design efforts that we'll want to start looking at within the next 5 years. So one of the projects that's not been in any of our previous plans is Golden Valley Road, 7th Avenue, also referred to as O'Brien Pass. So that was identified as a need here. It's something that, pending the outcome of our final evaluation, would probably be a good subject for a future corridor study or corridor plan to get a better understanding of the needs at a finer level of detail. Again, the RTP is looking at the entire region, so we're not drilling down to a lot of detail in each of these projects. In terms of freeways, again, no surprise that the Spaghetti Bowl and 395 North and I-80 in Sparks continue to be our top needs. We have obviously the support of NDOT through this process as well, so we're going to continue to work with them on the final packaging of freeway improvements. And with regards to new road construction, again, many of these I think are familiar to you. The Pyramid 395 connector by far attracted the most vehicles in terms of average daily traffic. By a large order of magnitude, that we're expecting about 61,000 cars a day on the Pyramid 395 connector. And that is a significant benefit to the rest of the roads in our network. The extension of 9th Street across UNR to Wells Avenue was a project that came out of the UNR study adopted earlier this year. So that one is also shown here. The West Sun Valley Arterial has been in the RTP for a number of years, and this was an opportunity for us to reevaluate that to make sure it still meets the needs of the region, and it is showing some continued benefit. The Eagle Canyon Extension, you're familiar with through the planning study that's ongoing. A couple of the new projects in this one that we'll want to take a look at in more detail are the Moya Boulevard Extension near the airport, and is the construction of Estates Drive here off of Lemon. So those are, again, examples of new projects that we'll want to take a closer look at with some more detailed planning studies over the coming years. I wanted to provide a little bit more detail on the Pyramid 395 connector. This is one that we do get questions about from time to time in terms of who would use this facility. And it's a new link from Pyramid Highway just at the south end of Sun Valley over to 395. And as we have in our current RTP and would certainly continue forward, the Spaghetti Bowl and 395 improvements need to be phased before this connection goes into place. So I did want to reiterate that. But you can see where the travel demand is for that corridor. A lot of these, and this is a map showing morning peak period travel. So these brown circles are the destinations, and the blue circles are the blue is the origin and the brown is the destination. So you can see a lot of the trips originating up here in Spanish Springs are destined for downtown Reno, the sort of South Virginia, South McCarran area and beyond, as well as the North Valleys. And we also see some trips originating in the North Valleys going over into Spanish Springs. So that gives you a little bit of background on the travel demand for that particular project. And it does have significant benefits for Pyramid Highway and McCarran Boulevard and Sparks Boulevard. We have a large number of multimodal projects in the plan as well. We've identified several new projects for the downtown Reno area. West 4th Street, West 6th Street are some that we want to be looking at. Center Street and Keystone are in our current plan. Audie Wells is about to go to construction, And one of the new ones is Rock Boulevard. And again, this is another example of a project we would want to take a closer look at through a planning study to really scope that out and identify what the needs are. So our next steps are to complete our public survey, and there's a virtual public meeting that goes along with that. We'll need to do our air quality conformity analysis. There's an air quality consultation group, including the US EPA and Nevada Department of Environmental Protection, as well as INDOT and Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. They've already been meeting every couple of months, and we'll continue to do that as we complete our air quality analysis. Excuse me. We also want to gather input from the jurisdictions. We'll be visiting it's that second week of January. You'll see us at each of the city councils, or both of the city councils and the Washoe County Commission, to gather additional input, and then we'll bring that project listing back for you in January. So that is the conclusion of the presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'll turn it over to the board for some questions. I did have a couple of comments. Thank you very much for that initial sort of overview. From a timing standpoint, so obviously this board will have much input with regards to all of those items. I would imagine a lot of that input will be derived from the body discussions at Sparks and Washoe County and Reno. So from a timing perspective, you said this is coming back in January to us for our discussion before it goes to those bodies, or after it has gone to those bodies and then it comes to us?
It will be going to the entities the week of the 11th, and then I believe it's the following week is our board meeting.
Okay, so we'll have 1 week to kind of chew on what the individual bodies, but how, I'm going to guess the agenda will have already been put out. And so how are we going to gather and pull together that information and get it on the agenda? We can talk about this offline. I just want to make sure that we as a body have plenty of time to receive and evaluate the information from the individual bodies. I mean, these decisions will live well beyond our tenures in any of our boards in which we sit. So this to me is probably, or is the most important work that we will do. So I just want to make sure we have plenty of time to receive and evaluate what the individual bodies are providing us feedback. And second, we state that our driving decision point is safety, but I didn't hear, although maybe it's embedded, how Vision Zero plays into and coordinates with these priorities. And then finally, full transparency and understanding of how the ranking and evaluation system works. I think it's a bit mysterious, and I think for the benefit of everybody, we need to have a better understanding of what that is, what goes into it, and how some of these projects rise to the top. As an example, the Northeast Connector, while you just showed a graph that was some good information, I still need a better understanding of how a failed road to a failed road somehow benefits and is the top priority in that category. It's a bit confusing to me. So I'm going to need a one-on-one with a deep dive, and I'm going to guess every board member is going to need the same. So that's just my first swing. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you said the Northeast Connector, are you talking about the 395 Pyramid Connector? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and if we can land on what we're going to call it, because I think it can be confusing, because we've always called it the Pyramid 395 Connector. Here we're calling it the Northeast Connector. Whatever it is, we're talking about the same thing.
I couldn't agree more. I'd really like to understand what it's trying to achieve, and I will tell you, I have huge reticence in terms of the amount of traffic that Wild Creek High School will ultimately add to McCarran. So I can see some benefit there. But when this was conceived, Wild Creek High School did not exist. it wasn't even in the planning stages. There was no intent to utilize that parcel. So I'd still like to understand how we kind of got where we are, and I don't want to be there just by serendipity. I really do want to understand that connector. One of the things that I did not see, and I appreciate the numbers. Eagle Canyon was not on there, and even though it's a collector, there's huge volumes of traffic that go up Eagle Canyon, up and down Eagle Canyon, because of the fact that there are two schools. And I think we've, and I don't want to say we failed, but I want to say that maybe there can be better coordination in the future with the Washoe County School District to understand the kinds of numbers that they're driving. And we've been using historic platforms to look at these things, but the problem is when I was a kid, man, there had to be some massive disaster, and I'm not talking about rain, for my parents to take me to school. I just had to figure out how to get to school, and we didn't have buses either. We weren't walking uphill both ways in the snow. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it was a different environment, and you did not see the traffic generation, that we see now. And I've watched on my very own street how the levels of traffic have dramatically increased because of one single elementary school. So maybe those are the kinds of things that we can have a deeper discussion on. I did not see Mount Rose Highway on there. Mount Rose Highway has some, there's some real immediate needs. And Amy, you and I and Bill and others, we've talked about the Pyramid Highway and the numbers that are increasing seemingly daily on the Pyramid Highway. So I don't know what our timelines are. I know that we've got a $23 million grant. I want to say thank you for working on that. That's amazing. But we really do need to push that thing forward as quickly as possible, because there's huge amounts of congestion. You didn't used to see it until peak hours, and now it doesn't matter what time you're out on Pyramid Highway. There's a lot of traffic, and there are some really sticky places that we just need to look at. Places that historically haven't been as bad, but are now getting worse. So I'll yield, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other commissioners have any questions or comments at this time? I'm gonna guess, Amy and Bill, you will be setting up one-on-ones with all of us.
And Madam Vice Chair, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's a challenge with Zoom, right? I don't have the hand. I can't find my hand, so I didn't want to give you a thumbs up because that was the wrong indication. So
Bill, it's connected to your arm.
That's right. Let's say right hand sign. What I was going to add is, this is a big thing. This is our network for the next 30 years. We will be looking at it another, Amy, 4 years? The RTC board at that time will be looking at it. So it's not necessarily etched in stone permanently, but this is the document that says, with the 3 jurisdictions that make up Washoe County, this is our regional network, this is our roadway network. And I think sometimes when we talk about this, and I think it's just human nature, it's to go down to the granular level instead of really focusing on the big picture of what are we trying to design over the next 30 years. And I'm not saying we don't need to, which we do, get down to prioritizing, but what's most important in this conversation, I think this is really something we need to bring forward to the local governments, is let's make sure we have the network captured. And if we can't, resolve which one's first, which second's, which third in this effort, we don't have to. We still have the RTIP. We still have other ways of really fine-tuning that. But it's most important for us to use this time to decide, what do we want our community to look like in terms of roads? For example, in getting to the safety, the one that's become apparent to me is, in some cases, we're looking at roads going from 4 to 6 lanes. We already have a lot of issues on safety with 4-lane roads in terms of speed and conflicts, yet it can be very difficult to make connections. In other words, taking a road that's been historically dead-ended but has a purpose to connect to another road is often very volatile and hard for a localized neighborhood to accept, but it is a better choice as a way to disperse traffic so everybody's not on the same road. And so those are the kind of conversations I hope we can have is, what are the trade-offs? Where are the situations where connectivity can resolve widening and major expensive roads? So we give people more choices and more alternatives in terms of how they travel throughout the community. So again, I just wanted to end it by saying, this is the big picture. And we need to stay, because that's our job as RTC and the 5 of you, is we need to stay focused on designing the system, the transportation network. And to the extent we can't quickly get to which was number 1, 2, or 3, just know that that's a decision that will be made. It doesn't have to be made today.
Thank you, Bill. And that was very well said. And we, of course, we tend to and want to get more granular, which is will have its place. But to your point, and I'll be brief, is when you look at the bigger picture in the 30,000 feet, there are opportunities where we can see what development is coming in and get on the front end of it with regards to roads. As an example, we know in the Verdi area now what the western side of Reno is going to build out to. I mean, we have specific projects, unit caps, et cetera. So in anticipation of knowing what that will look like, how do we better plan for congestion, road improvements, et cetera, in that area? And that's what I think maybe we can do a better job of looking forward. The other thing is just from a public perception and understanding is when we move forward with studies on something, there is the belief system that once a study is complete and it identifies a need, that there will be somewhat imminent action taken to address that need. And that's not always the case, and that frustrates the community. South Meadows, the study we did in South Meadows is a perfect example. It identified a number of improvements that were needed. Did I see any on any of these lists? I'm not really sure that I did. So that's where there's kind of a bit of a disconnect between the initiation of a study and the application of an improvement. And so I think those are the discussions we need to have as we move forward. So while it's a good starting point, I think there's a lot of opportunities to better understand the selection and the participation of governments and the public to play a part in this and make sure that we're putting the priorities in the right places. And again, back to connecting to our Vision Zero. Where did that come in? So, okay, lots of discussions to be had on this. Ms. Cummings, do you have anything else at this time?
We certainly welcome one-on-one meetings with each of you and look forward to that and look forward to continuing the conversation next month.
Fantastic. Okay, I don't believe that was an action item, correct? No action. Okay, item 5.1, finance. Stephanie, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
No, we do not.
Thank you very much. Stephanie, you're up. Yes, we can see the screen. But I think you might be on mute.
It took me a moment to find the unmute button. I apologize.
No worries.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie Haddock, Director of Finance for the record, and I'm going to give everyone an overview of our fiscal year 2020 comprehensive annual financial report. So this morning we'll start with our revenues. Our total revenues were up $186.5 million for fiscal year 20. That's up 10% or $16 million over fiscal year 2019. As you can see from the pie chart, our significant revenue source at 46% is still our fuel tax, which came in at $85 million, and that is $6.4 million or 7% to budget, and down 6.4 million or 7% to budget, and down 1.3 million or 1.5% over last year. All of that decrease was primarily due to the 5% decrease in Washoe County gallons that we had as a result of the pandemic. As I'm sure most of you know, the shutdowns and the conditions that we increased remote working for us. And we lost a lot of tourism gallons when we had the cancellation of our major tourism events and conventions. So we had 18% of our revenue come from our our sales tax. That came in at $33.5 million. That was actually on target to budget and up $1.6 million or 5% over last year. All of that, our Washoe County taxable sales did really well during the pandemic. It ended the year up 4.8% over last year. Some of the contributing factors to that were the federal stimulus that was put out during the initial pandemic. And, you know, we have to give our county some credit in that we have diversified our economy away from heavy reliance on our entertainment and casino industry. So a lot of people continued to work through the pandemic, unlike the rest of our state. We had 26% of our revenue sources come from our federal operating and capital grants. That was a total of $48 million. This is down $17 million or 26% to budget, but up $21 million and 80% over the prior year. The decrease over our budget was because of the timing of $19 million in capital federal funding for our 17 replacement hybrid buses and the 2 electric buses we bought for our Virginia Street project. We had budgeted all of that in fiscal year 20, but those buses are actually coming in this fiscal year 21. Our increase over the $20 million increase over last year is all due to $8.3 million in federal funds that we're using for our operating expenses from our CARES Act funding. And we also received $23 million in small starts funding that we are using for that, the construction that we used for the construction of the Virginia Street project. So we also received $7.4 million in regional road impact fees. That's up $2.4 million or 47% to budget, and $2 million or 52% over last year. The impact fee revenue increases are all due to our continued development projects going on through the pandemic, and we had no shutdowns in construction. We received $4.3 million in passenger fares. That was down $1.5 million or 26% to budget, and down $1.2 million or 22% over last year. All of the passenger fare revenue losses due to the pandemic. Our ridership on the ride service was down 5%. And oh my gosh, can you guys hear me? What happened? I don't know.
I can hear you, but I can't see your screen.
Uh-oh. Is it back?
It's back.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. I didn't touch anything. Go back. Okay. All right. So anyway, access ridership was down 22% for the year. So $7.8 million in investment and other miscellaneous revenues. And that's down $1.3 million to budget and down $6 million over the prior year. This category also includes our project reimbursements, which the timing of those project reimbursements varies from year to year. And that difference over last year, we had $7 million in utility project reimbursements for that first phase of the Virginia Street project. And that all happened in last year. So that's why that variance looks strange. So on our expenditure side, we had $162 million for fiscal year 2020. That's up $38 million or 31% over the prior year. As you can see, most of those expenditures are in our street and highway program at $87 million. That's actually a $35 million increase over last year. All of that due to the construction of our Virginia Street project. That's a total $39 million we spent on that project in fiscal year 20. Actually, we had $77 million total projects in the street and highway program and $2.8 million in road projects on the impact fee program. If you want to see the details of all of our project expenditures, you can find those on pages 105 and 104 and 105 of our CAFR. We have $41 million in ride operating expenditures. That was actually up $1.2 million or 3.2% over last year. That is all due to, this is the first year of our Keolis contract, the new contractor, and it represents a 25% cost increase over our prior year contractors. And this fiscal year also included a one-time startup expenditure of $590,000. It won't go into our future years. RTC maintained our regular operating service all through this pandemic. And in fiscal year 20, we actually increased our revenue vehicle hours by 20% to continue to provide for social distancing on our buses. All the additional expenditures that we did experience in our fiscal year 20 were covered by our CARES Act funding. We had $22 million in debt service. That represents 14% of our total expenditures. This is actually down $2.4 million to our budget. We did refund our 2010 B and C bonds in fiscal year 20. The refunding of these bonds created an additional $27 million in debt service savings over the total life of our bonds through 2043. Additionally, we did a refunding in 2019, and then we have this refunding in 2020. So that $22 million in debt service that we will see going into our future years is a decrease from our previous annual debt service per fiscal year of $27 million. For access, we had $9 million in operating expenditures. This was actually flat over last year and down $1.8 million or 17% to our budget. All that decrease is due to the pandemic. We actually had a significant decrease in our revenue vehicle hours that we provided for the access service, which lowered our overall operating costs. We had $3 million in MPO expenditures for their planning studies and the update of the RTP that you just heard about. So by the end of the year, our total actual expenditures were $16 million under our fiscal year 20 budget. All of the savings are carried forward into the current year, fiscal year 21 budget. I will highlight that most of these savings came from our street and highway program, $14 million, but we do need to continue to carry those forward in this fiscal year and actually our future fiscal years for all those road projects that were actually mentioned in your previous presentation that will continue. We're in design and construction. So lastly, we have our RTC's net position. This is our overall financial position. Our total liabilities exceeded our total assets by $112 million at the close of the fiscal year. RTC's total net position continues to be negative, and that results from the fact that we have bonded $319 million for infrastructure assets. All the road projects that we do, these infrastructure assets are not actual assets of RTC. And I'm sure that most of you are familiar that these assets are your assets, either the City of Reno's, City of Sparks, or Washoe County. Net position is comprised of three different components. We have our RTC investment in capital assets, which increased $5.3 million over last year. That's due to the purchase of 13 paratransit replacement vehicles and some upgrades that we made to the Villanova and Sutro facilities. RTC's restricted net position increased $2.5 million over last year. Restricted net position represents funds that are either externally restricted by state statute, bond covenants, or grant regulations. Our increase is all due to the cash that we received from our federal grants. And finally, our RTC's negative unrestricted net position, as I mentioned, decreased $23 million over last year. And again, that's all due to the bond refunding that we did. We reduced our overall debt for the agency. And that negative unrestricted net position will continue until our bonds are paid off in 2043. So for our audit results, we have all good news. We again received an unmodified opinion. It's the highest possible rating. We had no findings or management comments on our financial audit and no findings or management comments on our A133 single audit, which is the review of our federal grants. I would like to thank all of our RTC staff for all the good work that they do. We could not get these great audits if they weren't doing everything that they are supposed to do. I also want to thank my staff, specifically Elena Williams, Linda Merlin, Hannah Yu, and Nelia Beelan. They are the staff that puts this CAFR together. And also special thanks to Nancy Mew. She does all the graphics work for us. And last but not least, I'd also like to thank our auditors, Crow, Scott Nickerson, a partner from Crow, is on this Zoom meeting with us, and I'll give him a minute to make any comments he has. It was an interesting audit this year. We did it completely remotely due to the pandemic. None of the auditors were in our offices as they normally were, but it went really well. So I thank them for their great work. And as always, it's always great to work with them. Scott, would you like to make any comments?
Sure, I'll just make a brief comment. I concur with the audit results Stephanie reported. And I believe that in a COVID environment, Stephanie and her team did an excellent job of being able to manage remotely and work through all the document requests and information. The other thing I wanted to point out is, as you can see from Stephanie's presentation, the complexity of RTC's operations are growing each year. And so what I really appreciate about her team is the fact that they take full responsibility for understanding the accounting and technical aspects of the reporting, as well as preparing the financial statements themselves and putting together the package, which is something that should never be taken for granted. So I think that's something to mention about the team, being accountable. I think from the standpoint of reporting, we put a lot of focus on the CARES Act funding and on the grant funding to make sure that the organization is complying with the various regulations, knowing that those scrutiny is going to increase over time. And also, I want to thank RTC for participating in our transit roundtable and being active in GFOA and other activities to continue to bring information to the organization to help the organization be better. So that's all I wanted to share today. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Scott. So that's the conclusion of the presentation. So I can take any questions that you might have.
Scott and Stephanie, thank you very much. What a great presentation, an incredibly clean and precise CAFR. Always do such a great job. So Stephanie, team, and Scott, everybody, sincere appreciation for your work on this. I know it's not easy in regular times, much less in these difficult times. I know we're about to lose Mr. Lawson, so I wanted to kick it to him and see if he had any questions or comments at this time.
Nope. Good CAFR. Good job.
Do any other commissioners have any comments? Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to congratulate Stephanie and her team. Well done. I know we've had some hiccups in the past. I'm glad we're well past that, and I think you guys have put in some great stopgaps. So good job. Thank you.
Any other commissioners have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, this is for action. I'm guessing this is just to receive, to accept the CAFR.
Motion to accept, Madam Chair.
I have a motion.
Second, Delgado.
And a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Madam
Any
Chair,
opposed?
do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you so much. Commissioner Hartung, Madam Clerk. Okay, we do not have any public comment. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much again, Stephanie. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6.1, Public Transportation and Operations, the approval of the RTC 2020 Coordinated Human Services Public Transportation Plan. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'm gonna go off the line right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Lawson.
I'll see you guys.
Enjoy your time with your son.
I will. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, who's giving this?
Good morning, everybody. For the record, Jim Gee from the RTC.
Good morning.
Over the last 6 months, the RTC has been in the process of updating its Coordinated Human Services Public Transportation Plan for Washoe County. This plan is required by the Federal Transit Administration to be able to receive grant dollars under the Section 5310 program. Section 5310 is designed for projects which improve transportation options for senior citizens and the disabled above and beyond the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act. As a designated recipient, RTC receives between $350,000 and $400,000 a year in federal dollars to be used for these projects, which must be included in the coordinated plan in order to be funded. We use a consultant to develop this plan, and with us today is A.T. Stoddard from LSC Transportation. to discuss the process that we used and the results of the plan update. AT, I'll turn it over to you for your brief presentation.
Good morning. Thank you, Jim. Members of the board, Director Thomas, I'm A.T. Stoddard with LSC Transportation Consultants. We did this as a team effort, and with me on the call also today, in case we need to address any specific questions, are Megan McPhillamy, who is with our firm, and then Laura Brown, who is with RLS Associates, which was our subcontractor. I am going to be brief. This will be at a high level, but talk about our process, some of the key findings, and then the recommendations that are included in the plan. In terms of the process, it was interesting because we had put our proposal together pre-COVID and then started in April, so we had to adjust and react to how we sought out input. We did a number of things to get input from the community. We had 39 agencies that we contacted, conducted a number of interviews, did an extensive inventory, updating information on all the transportation services that are available and funding programs, the human services agencies, put those together, provided interim reports for review, made that information available on the website. We put out a pretty extensive email list, so we would update people as we had information out there and sought input. We did a number of virtual video meetings with different groups and also conducted a community survey. A lot of times what we will do is go out and go to a senior center at lunchtime and talk to folks and do a short survey, but that was not an option. So we used the various agencies and entities that we had talked with to help get the information out. And we did an online survey with a paper option, and we had 155 responses to that, which for this kind of study is pretty good. You really have a very focused audience. Just some of the key findings that we found as we went through this, and these are comments we received either through the community survey or the various interviews. One being lack of affordable transportation, people seeing needs for door-through-door service, that higher level of service for some people who just are not able to negotiate using a curb-to-curb service. There were a lot of comments about limited service area, and of course that depends upon the various providers that are out there. And another one we heard was lack of accessible vehicles, which depends on what agency a person is trying to get transportation from. So the RTC vehicles are accessible. RTC Access provides accessible vehicles, but if a person is using a volunteer or Uber or Lyft or some of those programs, they don't necessarily have accessible vehicles to accommodate someone who has some type of mobility device. We also heard comments about requirements for advanced reservations, and of course, some programs are more flexible with that. The Washoe Senior Ride, Lyft, Uber, N4 Connect are all able to operate more responsibly, where RTC Access requires advanced reservations. I think some of the bigger ones that directed us towards some of the recommendations were with the coordination and just one agency not knowing what other agencies did typically. And so often they didn't know what other resources available. If one agency couldn't accommodate a request, they didn't necessarily know to whom to refer that person, or really end up being focused on their own programs. And so we saw that as something that really needed to be addressed, because there are resources in the community, but people who are serving different segments of the community don't necessarily know what other resources are available. In terms of implementation plan, we came up really with 3 overall goals based on what we heard and the needs. The first one we saw is creating a local coordinating council. This would be made up of the various human services agencies, RTC would be represented there, and most likely users of the various services. And the purpose has really twofold. One is information sharing and knowing what others are doing and looking for opportunities to coordinate. Another is to really provide recommendations to RTC for the funding programs. So rather than each individual agency submitting grant applications, they would come through that local coordinating council, and it's an opportunity for them as a group to start giving some recommendations as to priorities in the community. It doesn't take away the authority or responsibility from RTC to fund these programs, but rather is another source of input and hopefully addressing community priorities. The second goal is to enhance mobility, and this is one that has been continuing. It was addressed in the previous plan, and so with RTC, one of the roles would be to encourage the various human services agencies to identify needs and specific projects to come forward for funding to support the coordinated transportation plan to fill some of these gaps. Some of the gaps will be filled undoubtedly by RTC. As the Flex Ride service goes into more zones, that may meet some of the needs in terms of availability of service. So RTC's role will be to announce these opportunities, bring in the grant applications. The local coordinating council, once formed, would provide input on priorities, and then it would come back to RTC again for determining what programs actually would be funded through, as Jim mentioned, that FTA Section 5310 program, which is for services for individuals with disabilities and seniors. Our third goal, and this is longer term, is to establish a one-call, one-click center where all of the information would be at a single point. The real benefit is for the user. They make one contact, whether it's through a website portal or by phone. They're connected then with the appropriate transportation provider, and they don't have to hunt for the information or hunt for what agency can give them a ride, but rather it goes through the single entity. This is a longer term proposal, and some of the things that will need to be done is to identify the functions. What will this do? Will it be information only, information referral, or will it be set up so people could actually schedule a ride? As we see it, that's the direction to take in the longer term, is to integrate the transportation services through this single point of contact. With the implementation plan, we identified timing and set some direction. You can see it's a multi-year process, and most likely by the time we get toward the end of the implementation, we'll be updating this plan. But you can see that the first thing is putting together that local coordinating council in basically the first year, bringing those entities together, determining who's on, who's interested, setting up their role, and then having them involved. Enhancing the transportation services will be ongoing. That's already something that's being done, but restructured a little bit, particularly bringing in that coordinating council. And then with the third, really establishing that one-call, one-click center is after the coordinating council is involved, having them work towards identifying what are the actual functions that should be part of that one-call center, and then moving forward, identifying a lead agency, what entity will take responsibility for that and be the lead to put it in place, and then moving forward with setting it up and putting it in operation. So that gives a direction for the implementation, and that really ends the presentation, and I'll be happy to address any specific questions you may have or any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Stoddard. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation and such incredible work to increase efficiencies and usability. I think it's some great stuff you've brought to the table. I will open it up to my fellow commissioners for questions and comments at this time. Am I seeing any hands being raised? I'm not seeing anything at this time. Can you tell me again what the next step is and when you, timing, you might have said that in there and I missed it. Like how long before we get to goal 3? I think the call center, the one click, one call is significant. And for the public's information and hours, like what do we anticipate to get to that?
We identified that as probably being put in place in about year 3 or 4. And again, it depends upon what level that center will actually take. If it's information only, that could happen earlier. If it is integrating all the services into a single point of contact so that a person calls and they get scheduled on a ride, that's going to take longer because there's some technology and infrastructure that needs to be put in place. The agreements need to be set. So that's probably year 4 or 5 to actually achieve that level.
Okay, that's really significant for our community. You know, breaking down the silos, having one point, one number, those are huge benefits to our community. And as our transportation evolves and the transportation options expand, you know, getting that information out and making it easy for people to find out the best transportation option for their needs is significant. So I appreciate this work very much. Director Thomas, I see you came off of mute. Did you have something to say?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I just wanted to say that I think we will move as fast as we can, but just recognizing that we're dealing with external parties and external organizations. A lot of the speed at which we move is going to be dependent on their ability to adapt and engage and maybe change the way they do business practices to move towards this one click. So we're very committed to it, but it's just the recognition that we have a lot of other players we have to get kind of in sync.
Understood. And this, I can relate to this very much. We've been going through this exercise at the Community Homeless Advisory Board to better coordinate, consolidate, and get information to more of a central point. And it does take some work to get the folks to come on board and share information and collaborate and break those silos down. But when you look at it from the global benefit, it has immense value to the user. And we must always keep the user at the forefront of all decisions that we make. So I appreciate this effort. Anything that we can do to help move it along even faster is certainly something I am supportive of. So at this point, this is a accepting of the report again? Is that the correct motion?
That's correct.
Okay. May I get a motion?
So moved, Hartung.
A motion and a second. We already confirmed there was no public comment. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries unanimously. Item 7, Director Reports. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on any of these items?
We do not.
Thank you very much. Director Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Sadly, I have my Christmas tie on, but Zoom doesn't let me show it. So once a year, I get to pull it out of the closet. And during the pandemic, I guess we all have to adjust in whatever ways we can. I don't have a Christmas hat, or I would have worn that. I wanted to start by, sadly, he's not on anymore, but by welcoming Mayor Lawson to the board. He is now and will be going forward for the next 2 years for the term of the appointment as we're set out in our bylaws and rules. He will be the Sparks representative. I know all of you work with him, and he's a very engaging individual, and I think he will add a lot to our conversations and our direction. So I look forward to working with him, as I sure the rest of the members of the board do. I did also want to mention, too, that Commissioner Delgado was reappointed for another 2 years. So while it's not a change, he is new again to us. So I wanted to acknowledge all those. And I think Commissioner Hartung, I think in January, Washoe County will be making their decision, if I'm not mistaken, and we'll be announcing to that board, hopefully a familiar face, but we'll see what happens here. The there's a couple of recognitions I want to make to our staff. First of all, to Stephanie and Yelena and all of the staff members in finance. I think, like the board said, it's not a simple task to track all the different funding sources and keep on top of where money's flowing, particularly as we've gone more and more as an agency into the federal arena. Tracking and reporting is more complex. And so to have a audit and CAFR that was this way, I'm very proud of it as the director of the organization, as I'm sure all the board members are and have said. I also wanted to announce a very special anniversary. So Susie Trinidad, who's a para-transit analyst for our RTC, has been with us for 15 years as of January 9th of 2021. So we want to thank Susie both for her public service to RTC, but more specifically her unique talents and skills in dealing with probably the most challenging segment of our customer base. And she does a great job of communicating and engaging with our riders who are often, obviously and frequently challenged by their abilities to use and contact and understand our transit system. So thank you very much, Susie. After 21 years of service, hard to believe, Warren Call, one of our engineers and project managers, will be retiring on January 8th. Warren's been with RTC when he started his career here in March, since March 22nd, 2000. During his tenure, and I doubt this probably captures everything, but he's completed at a minimum 35 construction projects, including Victorian Avenue, Parr Boulevard, US 395 McCarran Interchange, 4th Street Prater Way Bus Rapid Transit, and his most recent project, which I was glad to be out there along with Commissioner Delgado, was the Plum Lane Rapid Transit Station. Warren's demonstrated a strong commitment and excellence in his work and is not only recognized by all of us at RTC, but he's also recognized by his peers, having been named the 2019 Engineer of the Year by the American Society of Civil Engineers, Truckee Meadows branch. Thank you, Warren, for all you've done for us, all your contributions. We will sincerely miss you, especially your Southern charm, which we've all become used to, and you will be noticeably missed in our conversation. So thank you for all you've done, Warren, and good luck with your next adventure. I also wanted to extend congratulations to two of our partners. FTA Region 9 Deputy Regional Administrator Ed Carranza is retiring after 22 years of federal public service. And Greg Novak, after 22 years of federal public service, after 42 years of public service, not 22, 42. So clearly, Greg's added a lot to our community in FHWA. He's the was the FHWA Deputy Division Administrator for Nevada. And we want to thank both of these gentlemen for their years of service to our country and our community specifically, and particularly their support on RTC projects and the many road and transit projects they've been involved in. As I mentioned earlier, the new Plum Lane Rapid Station was completed last week and is opening to passengers on Monday. On Tuesday, we invited the media to talk about the new station and the benefit it will bring to the neighborhood. All major television outlets attended, participating in the event were Commissioner Delgado, Mark Maloney, Director of Public Transportation, and very thankfully, Joel Grace from the Reno Experience District and Rick Cazaza and Nettie Oliverio from Reno Public Market. Our two neighbors, which are hopefully going to bring not only great impact to us in terms of getting riders on our buses, but also our buses will be used as a way to help them economically in their most important projects to benefit our community. Everyone shared their enthusiasm and excitement about the new station. Red and Reno Public Market representatives highlighted how beneficial our transit service will be to their developments. These improvements will be a significant boost to our local economy and future regional prosperity. Our thanks to RTC Project Manager Warren Paul for his, and our design consultant, Stan Tech and Q&D Construction, who completed the work. I'm proud to announce that we've received another FTA grant award. The FTA announced the grant award on November 30th in the amount of $131,661 for the real-time transit infrastructure monitoring project we submitted. The grant will help to fund a monitoring system on a portion of Virginia Street using 3D imaging, cameras, and LiDAR to assist us in maintaining our transit system in a state of good repair in collaboration with the University of Nevada, Reno, and the City of Reno. Our sincere thanks to U.S. Department of Transportation, the Federal Transit Administration, and our Nevada congressional leaders, Senator Cortez Masto, Senator Rosen, and Congressman Amodei for their support and leadership investing in our local infrastructure to improve our regional transportation systems. And I might point out this is a pilot project which, if it's demonstrated to be successful, might likely be used by many other transit agencies across the country. The current situation with COVID-19 pandemic in Washoe County has prompted us to cancel this year's New Year's Eve free ride service. This was a difficult decision for us to make, but we want to encourage everyone to celebrate safely at home with members of their immediate household to support and comply with Governor Sisolak's statewide pause. Even though the New Year's Eve free ride service will be canceled, transit will run on a normal schedule on New Year's Eve for essential trips. On New Year's Day, transit will operate on the Sunday level holiday schedule. Go to rtcwashoe.com for route and schedule information. A reminder, masks are required when taking transit, and transit passengers are reminded to practice social distancing while on board and at transit stops and stations. We greatly appreciate and owe a debt of gratitude to the frontline transit service workers who have maintained essential transit service during the past 10 months and through the holidays and into 2021. I would like to end with congratulating a very important person in our organization. Not that all of our RTC employees are important, but Amy Cummings has been elected Vice President of the Association of the Metropolitan Planning Organizations Board of Directors, beginning in January. Amy served on this board since 2018. The AMPO organization advocates for metropolitan regions and helps shape policy at the national and federal level that benefits all MPOs in order to craft a metropolitan vision for the future. So thank you, Amy, for serving on this board. What it means to us as an organization to bring that knowledge and skill, and how proud we feel about you recognizing us at a national level. So, Madam Vice Chair, I am done with my comments or my report.
Thank you very much, Director Thomas. Appreciate all of your updates on all of those major things, including the incredible anniversaries and retirements. And organization is only as good as its people, and RTC sure has a lot of great people. So kudos to everyone. That's just tremendous. Do commissioners have any questions or comments? Commissioner Hartung, you came off of mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I wanted to congratulate Warren. I've known Warren for many years, since I was a Citizens Advisory Board member. He was deeply involved in many of the projects in Spanish Springs and Pyramid and McCarran and others. He's been a long time colleague. So congratulations to him, and hopefully a long and prosperous retirement. Sadly, what ends up happening is you end up doing other things and you don't end up retiring. He'll probably end up being a consultant now. And so that's the bane of good engineers. Anyways, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So true. That is very, very true. Okay, any other comments or questions on Director Thomas's report? All right, moving on, federal report. Bill, you're back up.
Sorry, Madam Vice Chair. We have submitted to each of you a ever-evolving update, which seems to change by the day, of what's going on at the federal level. The latest that I would share with you is it looks like they're, with the most recent funding bill that's working its way through to be, I think, approved. If it hasn't been today, it needs to be approved today or the federal government shuts down. There appears to be, as I last read, $15 billion for transit, which is a good thing. And we're still waiting to see how and if that funding tool gets approved. And I know Director Swallow may or may not have more recent information because we're all watching that since we very much live and die by many of the funding programs that are included from or provided by the federal government. So I will certainly be available, and I can make any of our federal team available if you have specific questions. But other than that, if you haven't, I encourage you to take a look at that report.
Thank you very much. Any commissioners have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, moving on to NDOT.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Christina Swallow, Nevada Department of Transportation. I'm going to share my screen with you so we can you can follow along, as can the members of the public who are tuned in today. It is it's hard to imagine that we've been doing these virtually for as long as we have been, but it's good to be able to continue to do them virtually and connect with you and share with you what we've been doing and what we're focused on. So as I do, as I do every month, I wanted to start with safety. And you know that is our top priority across the department. And unfortunately, fatalities continue to increase across the state. At this point, at the end of November, we were up 5% year over year from 2020 compared to 2019. As of November 30th, there were 278 lives lost on Nevada roadways. Statewide, unrestrained motorist fatalities have gone up a staggering 43% from November year over year compared to 19. And here in Washoe County, there's been a 30% increase. Often I tell you the statewide change, but not the Washoe County change. So even in Washoe County, there's been a significant increase in unrestrained motorist fatalities. Pedestrian fatalities have decreased in Washoe County 21% compared to last year. And bicyclist fatalities have also decreased, going from 1 to 0. And I normally tell you about a single crash, but I'm going to pause here for a second because last week, a little more than a week ago on Thursday, I was at Southern Nevada RTC, and I commented about how their bicyclist fatalities were half of last year's. And then I think at almost the same time I was having that conversation with them, those fatalities dramatically increased, as you've seen in your news locally and across the national news. And I just wanted to remind everyone before I get further into this, five bicyclists lost their lives that day. And I talk about safety a lot, and I talk about it's our responsibility. But I just want to remind everyone, the speed limit is the limit. You can certainly go lower. You can go slower if you need to when you're passing a ped or a bike, and that makes sense to give them a little more space and make it a little safer for them. And 3 feet is the law when passing a cyclist, but that's the minimum. It's the opposite of the speed limit. That's the minimum. You can certainly give them more. And while time has shown that that driver was impaired, it is something that we should all think about every time we get into our car. The speed limit is the top limit. We can go slower if we need to because of wind or if the sun's in our eyes, to make sure that we're keeping our fellow community members safe. And the 3 foot distance, it's the minimum. If there's an open lane next to you, you should move fully into that lane and give that cyclist as much space as possible to make sure that they get home to their families safe. All right. Statewide motorcyclist fatalities have remained steady this time from last year. However, Washoe County has had an increase in motorcyclist fatalities compared to last year. As we all know, volumes are down on the network, and so the fact that fatalities are up is ever more concerning. All right, and so now here's the story. I was going to tell you that my team helped me prepare. That was a Washoe County fatality in November, but I couldn't not touch on the fact that in total on that day, 7 people lost their lives. It was the deadliest day in the state because there were 2 other fatalities that day in Clark County. All right, so on the evening of Monday, November 30th, a 32-year-old male pedestrian was struck by a vehicle while crossing Kitski near Galletti. The driver who hit him fled the scene in a blue sedan. The pedestrian, later identified as Cody Robinson of Reno, was taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries, and he later succumbed to those injuries. I mentioned a moment ago that the county's pedestrian fatality has decreased from the same time last year. However, we've still seen 11 pedestrian fatalities in Washoe County this year. An investigation is ongoing as officials continue to search for the hit and run driver. Therefore, we don't yet know if impairment was a cause, and we may not know. We are right in the middle of a holiday season, and although we might not be attending as many festivities and gatherings as previous years, Bill mentioned some of that earlier, there are still opportunities where we may find ourselves celebrating. And so we need to be mindful about our consumption and about getting behind the wheel after that. And remember to hold your friends and your families to account if they're impaired. We have the responsibility to always be aware, and it is in our hands to keep the holidays merry and bright and safe for each other, and to make sure that everyone gets home to their family and is not just there this year, but is also there next year for the holidays. As I mentioned last month, we've entered phase 1C of the Spaghetti Bowl project. We are prepping the I-80 eastbound to northbound US 395 bridge for widening. And that means there's going to be some marathon closures, with intermittent Spaghetti Bowl ramp closures. The majority of the closures are overnight, and detours are available to access Interstate 580 and US 395. Intermittent overnight ramp closures will also be in place on southbound I-580 between the Spaghetti Bowl and Villanova Drive. The ramps are critically important mobility connections for our communities, and we're making sure to keep our government and our first responder partners, as well as the public, updated on the full construction schedule. A full schedule of lane and ramp closures is available at n.spaghettibowl.com. We encourage community members to visit the site and to sign up for email and text construction alerts. So you don't have to wait till I tell you. We'll send construction email and text alerts if you sign up for them. So speaking of keeping the community updated, we concluded our Spaghetti Bowl virtual public meeting yesterday, and we hosted the online meeting for 2 weeks, and we had over nearly 1,000 visits to the site to get updated on our progress. So it was a great opportunity for the community to hear where we are and where we're going. Just a couple of key achievements. I think I mentioned a couple of these last month, but just in case, we have started our Reno Sparks Indian Community neighborhood wall and utility work. We've started that work. The bridge plans have been approved by the railroad, and we're working with them on the construction and maintenance agreement process. The design work is 80% complete, and we're still on schedule to achieve substantial completion in November of 2022. A few upcoming activities after the holidays will include an I-580 southbound traffic control shift, I-80 eastbound to I-580 southbound ramp relocated to a temporary ramp alignment, and demolition and construction of Mill Street, 2nd Street, Truckee River, and 4th Street UPRR bridges. So a lot still to come. As you can imagine, the project is still only finishing up the design. Even though we have some concurrent construction work, there's still a lot to come. All right. Winter officially begins on Monday, although we have had little bits and spurts of it tempting us in the last week. But as winter approaches, it often brings strong windstorms to our community. And in October, we discussed the installation of our new wind warning signs on US 395 in the North Valleys. Last week, we activated the 6 new signs. So we're excited that they're now activated. Lights on the advisory signs flash when the wind gusts reach 45 miles an hour or greater. Notifying drivers of high-profile vehicles of 9 feet or taller that travel through the area is not advised. It also cautions drivers of all other vehicles to reduce their speeds. Going back to what I said earlier, speed limit is the limit. You can certainly go slower if the conditions warrant. The system is similar to our long-standing wind warning signs in the Washoe Valley. It does have one exception in that the system advises against but does not prohibit high-profile vehicle travel. In the past 5 years, 12 crashes have been recorded in the area associated with high winds. And so this is a safety measure that we're implementing that we hope will help drivers navigate the corridor more safely. All right, now I have a couple of follow-up slides. So last month I presented information on our work program, including the distribution of funds across the state. And a few of you asked for more information regarding how the distribution is determined. And so I wanted to just make sure everybody understands we do not have a set distribution by county. Geographic distribution is a consideration that we look at after we do the initial prioritization of projects with respect to the goals outlined in the One Nevada plan. So on this slide here, you can see the goals and you can see the relative weighting of those goals. The goals were developed in partnership with all of our broad community stakeholders over several years, ending with the publication in 2018. We use readily available data to rank the projects. You can see the 6 goals are on the slide: connect communities, enhance safety, preserve infrastructure, optimize mobility, transform economies, and foster sustainability. And for each of those goals, in total, we have 15 weighted criteria to look at that at each of those goals. We do look at cost as well, in addition to after we prioritize all of the projects based off of the goals and the criteria within those goals. We look at funding eligibility, when the project will be ready. We do look at geographic distribution. We look at cost to value as part of that rating. And so that's how we ended up with the project. The project list and the work program that the board approved and we presented to you last month. I should note that in our harmonization, when we did the geographic distribution, there were no projects from Washoe County that were deferred or pushed as part of that process. So we had the projects, we ranked them from priorities, looked at the harmonization, and that is where we ended up. And so I wanted to also share a little bit more information. This slide does show the 21 to 24 allocations that I shared with you last month. You can see there's 2 columns in that column. If you look at Washoe, 17% versus 13. The difference is the 17%, we distributed the statewide investments across the counties versus holding them out separately. You can see that on the bottom row, the 1% versus 10% state. So that's the difference. And most of our statewide funds can be allocated across the counties, but in terms of our project prioritization, they're listed as statewide. But you can imagine bridge inspections, we know where the bridges are per county, and so we can kind of look at that. In any case, I did want to show you this additional information because, again, looking at how we harmonize, and we do consider, population, but we also consider system needs. And you can see while Clark has, 74% of the population, it only has 22% of the overall roadway network. Similarly, Washoe has 15% of the population, but 8% of the roadway network. And the rurals at only 11% of the population have 70% of our network. So this is constantly a challenge and a balance that we're working and navigating and really working to make sure that we preserve our valuable assets and ensure that we are also allowing people to get to where they need to go safely. So it's a balancing act, and I thought this might provide a little bit more information and help you understand some of the challenges we're facing as we try to prioritize all the projects across the state. And then I had one more follow-up. Last month, Chair Lucy also asked about the CMAQ program distribution. And so you can see on the slide, pretty much all of the information is there. It is, CMAQ is a congestion mitigation and air quality. For those who are tuned in and don't understand all of our abbreviations, we do have a lot of those. Our 3-letter acronyms, this one's a 4, but they can be confusing, a lot of jargon. So congestion mitigation and air quality. It's a federal funding source aimed at meeting the requirements of the Clean Air Act, which makes sense. It's allocated to the states based on areas of air quality non-attainment and maintenance and affected populations. While it's allocated to the state, the only current eligible counties for funding are Washoe and Clark. So we currently distribute the funds as shown, based generally on the principles of the federal funding distribution, severity of pollutants and affected population. You can see, if you look at the numbers, I looked at the numbers and I was like, wait, Clark doesn't have 83% of the population, but it has 83% of the affected population, because the only eligible populations for this are Washoe and Clark. So if that's 100%, the populations of those two counties, Clark has 83% of that population, Washoe has 17% of that population. We do plan on revisiting this distribution after the census numbers are available, as well as when Clark is anticipated to move into maintenance for ozone. We anticipate both of these will be prior to the next RTP updates. And we're currently holding the distribution the same as what we determined several years ago, even though Clark has since fallen into non-attainment for ozone. Both MPOs currently use this assumption in your RTP fiscal constraint considerations. But I did want to share with you that information and a little bit more background on that. And with that, I just wanted to say, thank you so much to all of you for a really good year. I'm going to say almost 2 years since I joined this board. We have really good conversations. You challenge us sometimes, but you also work with us to find the solutions. And I appreciate the fact that we have a strong collaboration to deliver our program throughout the Truckee Meadow and our Truckee Meadows, I should say. And I wish you all, I'm trying to stop sharing my screen. I wish you all a safe and happy holiday. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Swallow. Appreciate your updates. They're always very thorough and great graphics and stuff that we can share with our constituents as well in a format that is easily digestible. So I appreciate that. I did just want to start by just expressing just the sincere condolences for the tragic incident that happened in Las Vegas. And I don't even want to call it an accident. It's not an accident. It's not. Clearly there was impairment that appears to have contributed to it, but there's also road behaviors that are an unfortunate consistency that are always disappointing. And I relate it to a level of selfishness and people being more me than we. And we just have to really break that mentality of it's about me and where I'm going and my importance, and not so much about the we factor, whether it's sharing the road with kids traversing to school or the park on foot or on bike, or those out on a cycling venture in a group setting. And if there's a message, is just we have to get back to more, and not just with this, with so many things, more we and less me. So I know this is heartbreaking for you. It's heartbreaking for all of us. So that's a big deal. I did want to, you've always been very receptive on issues that are regional in nature and that we experience, not always just in the transportation sector. I know that the Nevada Cares campus, you were instrumental in helping us to get the Governor's Bowl, and I cannot thank you enough. And we are moving aggressively forward with its utilization to help our house's population. On that front, and in line with that effort, we have been getting some reports that the monitoring and the addressing of the homeless encampments under the bridges and along NDOT property has changed. And it used to be a system of constant sort of patrolling and addressing maybe before issues became issues. And it was great. There was a time a few years back where it was really bad. You guys changed an entire process. It became much better. But now we're understanding that addressing the encampments on NDOT property is written complaint based, and there's not the sort of proactive patrolling. And I don't know if that's just a COVID resource issue or if some fundamental approach has changed. So I don't know. I don't mean to put you on the spot now. If you wanted to speak to me offline, I don't know if you have anything on that, but I've been getting, I think this week alone, I got 2 pings on NDOT property issues.
I'm happy to address it. It is because it is a concern and a challenge. Unfortunately, the pandemic has impacted it, but not in the way that maybe you were implying. The CDC has very direct guidance on non-displacement of homeless encampments during the COVID pandemic unless certain triggers are available. And so we've been looking at this in terms of when we get a competing public health or safety comment or complaint, which is that's where we go to this comment or complaint. So when somebody else comes to us and lets us know that they have a greater public health concern than that of the potential disbursement of the homeless population of the unhoused as a result of the COVID pandemic, then we can weigh that. But we have been trying to recognize the challenges with managing and stopping the rise of the COVID cases throughout the state. We're trying to balance that with the other public health concerns that result as part of the encampment. So it's a balancing act. If you have specific areas where perhaps we have greater concerns regarding the public health concern, please by all means let us know. But we've actually received pretty strict direction not to relocate the encampments during this pandemic, and that's following the CDC guidance.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, we at the City of Reno have to do those balances as well. We just have seen, particularly in the colder months, a lot of fires that are being started. And I will say on some of the NDOT right-of-way, during the winter in particular, you get very, very nervous when I've personally witnessed cars that hit black ice and flipped up into areas where homeless encampments were very nearby. So that always concerns me about their safety. So there's always, I get it, there's that balancing act. So I was more curious if a resource had shifted because it was so effective previously. I didn't know if something had shifted. So it is COVID related. So
it is COVID related, and in all reality, the challenge is that coming out of it is where we will be resource constrained because the encampments will be so much greater. It will be much harder to do any sort of mitigation and cleanup on that end, which is, I mean, what we were doing before, it was very effective and efficient, and it made sure that we didn't have significant resource strained for doing the cleanup. So on the back end, I anticipate that we're going to be more challenged, and so that's going to be a different version of resource challenges. But because the longer they're left, the more there is to clean up.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. Okay, do any other commissioners have any questions or comments? Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to start with what you started with. I totally agree. These are not accidents. These are tragedies. And we almost really need to change our thought process and our speech about it because it's not. These are preventable. Director Swallow, I'd like to thank you. I see that you're on the road. I like that. That's good. That's right. That's right. Exactly. You need a fan. I want to thank you for the report. I'd like to ask a couple of questions because you did highlight some stuff in terms of enhancing safety and the amount that was spent statewide rather on that funding slide. And I'd like to ask you, because impairment and speeding is a huge issue, and we're seeing it everywhere. And I'm going to touch on this when we get to member comments as well. But would it be possible to have, and we don't have to do it the entire length of the Pyramid Highway, but especially out here in Spanish Springs, say from the library to the north end of the valley, would it be possible to do a road safety audit and look at that section of the road to talk about speeding? Because you talked about speed limit. Nobody does 55. Nobody. And if you do 55, you are impeding traffic. And so it's getting more and more dangerous out here. I want to thank NDOT for its conversations with respect to the light at Egyptian and Sunset Springs. I'm hoping we're still moving forward on that. And then Director Thomas and I have had conversations with respect to potentially taking that second lane, which would be a third lane in the overall highway from West Calle de la Plata to essentially Egyptian and Sunset Springs, which would act as an acceleration lane, but better would be the fact that the trucks do not have to merge back over into traffic, and it would allow I think a better flow. And it's really not that far. And Director Thomas and I have had that conversation with respect to Martin Marietta, I believe, would be willing to participate on an in-kind basis with some base and some asphalt, because this is a direct issue that impacts them and their drivers that are on that section of the road until it can branch into a 2-lane. So those would be my asks. I'm certainly not trying to beat you up, but I want to keep the chicken alive. So it's really important.
We can certainly look at a road safety audit. It sounds familiar to me though, so I don't know if we're already working with the RTC on something similar, but I'll get back to you to let you know one way or the other. I did want to clarify on the slide that the percentages weren't how we allocate the money, it was how we rank the projects. So on those criteria, there's a 22% rating for enhancing safety versus a 12% for connecting community. And what results is almost all of our projects, as you may know, are safety projects. But then how does preservation fit in there? How does sustainability or mobility, optimizing mobility? So that wasn't a percentage of fund allocation as much as how the projects are considered against the 6 goals.
No, and I appreciate that. Thank you for that clarification. But I don't know how we change behavior. This is a question. This is a question across the world. How do you change behavior? And it's a really tough question because it seems to be a moving target. I've noticed with COVID since the beginning of the year, people are just shorter on the road, and I mean just by their behavior, they're in a hurry, and it's an interesting observation on my part. I just really and maybe it's because I'm acutely aware of this, but I've noticed more and more people, motorcyclists, and look, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to single them out of the herd, but I can't tell you how often they fly through traffic and are just in a hurry. I've seen it very consistently, and so back to the behavior scenario. How do we change that behavior? And I don't know whether there is an easy answer. By the way, I genuinely don't.
One of the answers is looking at, as to your point, you're suggesting a road safety audit is looking how we change what we build. And I think as we start to, build the first phase of the pyramid connector, we're going to have conversations about what does that look like? Do we want to continue building the way we have historically, or do we want to start building slightly different? And some of those things are, do you put in 12-foot lanes, or do you put in 11-foot lanes, or do you put in 10-foot lanes? Our roads and what we design and the adjacent land use, is there a giant parking lot, or is there a building right on the back of the sidewalk? Those choices that we make when we build our communities have very direct outcomes and impacts on at least speed. Impairment is different. It's much harder. We have the legal system to help with that. We have enforcement to help with that. And we have these sorts of meetings and conversations where we can, call it to light and really say, like, look, what you choose to do, if you choose to get in the car after you did something that impaired your ability to operate your vehicle, it has a real impact. It's not just a number. So that's another piece. But certainly we have a role in our agencies on how we design the road so that it gives that signal to the driver about what appropriate speeds are, what appropriate activities are when using the road. So. No,
and I genuinely appreciate that. And I've made this comment before about we'll never see a complete change in terms of impaired drivers until we have complete autonomous vehicles where, The vehicle is making all the decisions. And by the way, I wasn't trying to single out motorcyclists. There's a lot of really great, very, very conscientious motorcyclists, and you know, the problem is that a few of them really kind of, you know, catch your attention, and that's the difficult part about it. But we have seen an increase in fatalities, and that's a frightening number for me. And I want everybody, regardless of whether it's the holidays or not, to get home and get where they're going safely. You know, whether you're walking or driving in a car or riding a bicycle or riding on a motorcycle, it doesn't matter. So, all right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Do any other members have any questions or comments of Director Swallow? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you so very much for all of your updates and your partnership. It's been a pleasure these last 2 years, and I look forward to collaborating with you on a number of issues as we move forward. And I do think there's an opportunity, particularly in the explosive growth that we're experiencing here at all of Nevada, but certainly Northern Nevada, to maybe rethink some of the engineering, particularly of some of these really high capacity roads, and ways we can better ensure safety and to get people to be a little more, I don't know if courteous is the right word, or just more aware of the conditions around them, because it is very, very concerning. So, and to Commissioner Hartung's point, it does appear that everybody is more aggressive right now, and I know there's a lot of stressors going on, and that's translating on the road, as well as many other areas, but certainly on the road as well, and it's resulting in some significant tragedies. So, okay, we are going to move on now to item 8. Madam Clerk, do we have any closing public comment?
No, we do not.
Thank you very much. Item 9, member items. Do any, Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Director Thomas, with respect to going back to safety, and even maybe trying to tie back into the Complete Streets program, what I'd really like to do is I'd like to talk about the pilot project, and I'm hopeful that we'll bring this forward. I haven't had anybody talk to me about this, so Ms. Jardin, you'll be the chair. Madam Chair, you'll be the chair next year. Commissioner Lucy will be stepping down, and then Sparks will be the secondary. They'll be the vice chair. But I'd like to discuss the concept of creating a pool of money for the 3 municipalities to do projects on many of our side streets. And here's what we've seen. We've seen a huge increase in traffic on side streets because many of the collectors are now, I don't want to say they're overwhelmed, but they're crowded. And so people are using apps like Waze and others to find their way through these neighborhoods. And so we need some help in terms of speed bumps and stop signs, and maybe other ways to control. I don't want to control the levels of traffic. I mean, I wish I could, but these are public streets. So that's not the suggestion nor the inference. The inference is how do we slow them down? Because all of these side streets are very multimodal. You've got kids that are walking. You've got kids that are riding their bicycles. You've got people that are walking their dogs. And then you've got a lot of people using them as thoroughfares. So that's if we could set aside a pot of money, I'd love to throw a number at you, but I'm gonna wait until we have this conversation to just say, look, let's do a pilot program, because I think that this could be highly successful and a way that we could make those side streets much, much, much safer. And that's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Hartung. It's a Reno representative that could potentially be the chair. I don't want it to be, I think this board votes on who. It's not a foregone conclusion, and it will be the board's pleasure on who they put in as chair. So I would be honored, but it hasn't been voted on yet. I agree with Commissioner Hartung that to discuss that issue. We too at the City of Reno are seeing immense squeeze, I guess, onto the more localized roads that are becoming more of the regional road functioning as such. And we are getting a lot more folks that during the pandemic that are out on foot and on bike, which is a great thing. But we need to address some of those local things. So I'm supportive of that as well. And the other question I had, and maybe Director Thomas, you can answer this. So you talked about the grant for the LIDAR that was to study the transit system to confirm that it was in good repair. Was an interesting phraseology that was used. Isn't that study also going to be inclusive of how we can potentially deploy the technology to increase safety at intersections for pedestrians or those on foot, on bikes, excuse me, or I thought the LIDAR study was going to be more expansive than just studying the efficiency of the bus system.
So I'll let Director Maloney talk about this specific application, but I would say holistically, the answer is yes. We're using LIDAR in multiple applications with the university, and this is one of them. So I would say every time we do one of these where we use LIDAR, it allows us to perfect that technology in terms of how it's going to be used. There's been a lot of things we've talked about how it could be used, including, for example, being able to count bicyclists and some of the other things that are very difficult to do. So I think this one was fairly tailored to the specific, as often the case with a grant, they want to see a specific thing. So this was probably tailored to the grant, but I'll ask Director Maloney to talk specifically about this one.
Thank you, Director Mark Maloney, Public Transportation. You're correct, Director Thomas. The piece here is two different folds. The overall LIDAR project with UNR does have a lot of safety components, as the Vice Chair pointed out, and it is looking at a lot of that working through our engineering department. They have a great partnership on that. This was a one-off grant that looked at utilizing LIDAR, not so much on the signal systems, but on the bus looking at our facilities. So as the bus goes down the road, it will actually look at all the bus stops and basically say, has something changed? And if something has changed, like, you know, broken glass, graffiti, trash, something on those, it will alert and allow us to be much more responsive to go out and repair those things. So it's really specific grant to do the facilities and making it so an automated feature, so things that happen out there don't go unnoticed or unfixed. And it's, as you mentioned earlier in your report, this is something that hasn't been done before, so it's something that has a lot of potential for other applications through the transit industry, and that's why the FTA gave us these dollars to pilot this along with UNR.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. Okay, Commissioner Delgado, do you have any future agenda items? Okay.
Nothing to add, thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else with their hand raised to make any comments.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just want to wish everyone a happy holidays, a safe holidays, and look forward to getting rid of 20. I'm not trying to wish it away, but oh boy, I'm looking forward to 21. So,
boy, isn't that the truth? You know what? He brings up thinking of, yes, putting this year behind us, but also recognizing all the things we didn't get to appropriately celebrate this year. And there are many within this agency that we just, and I just want to put it on Director Thomas's radar that there is the hope and the full expectation that we will have proper parties and celebrations for a number of significant projects that the RTC has been on the front end, whether it's Virginia Street or, you know, I'm you know, AUDIT Boulevard. I don't know. We need to celebrate a lot of things, and we need to do it appropriately. And what I'm saying is put some money aside, because we're going to party to celebrate these massive things that we've worked on for a very long time, and do it appropriately and celebrate as a community when it's safe to do so. So that's Okay. With that, we will move. May I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We got a motion in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Merry Christmas, everybody. Be safe.
Hey guys, be safe. Thank you.